Just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
Babe, what business do you mean?
They're prepaid for every hour that it is streamed online.
I'm so grateful for the things that I'm able to do.
I deserve prepaid for every hour that it is streamed online.
Once upon a time in Hollywood, there was an actress who had every possible advantage, every golden opportunity, and every platform imaginable to succeed. Her name was Rachel Zegler. She was discovered by none other than Steven Spielberg out of over 30,000 audition tapes. She didn't work her way up the ladder with small roles or humble beginnings. She didn't grind in the shadows like many actors trying to break into the spotlight. She walked right into the center of it, front and center, with Spielberg's blessing and a major film debut in West Side Story. That kind of entry into Hollywood is rare. It's what aspiring actors dream of. But instead of building on that once-in-a-lifetime momentum, Rachel Zegler took a sledgehammer to her own career, bit by bit, interview by interview, and post by post. The downfall didn't happen overnight. It wasn't a single mistake. It was a slow, deliberate unraveling. The kind that can only happen when someone believes they're untouchable, above criticism, and smarter than the audience they're supposed to connect with. That's exactly what happened. Rachel Zegler didn't just trip on her way to the top, she jumped off the pedestal with both feet and then blamed everyone else for the landing.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
So no Prince, or a different kind of Prince?
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story, just because like we cast a guy in the movie. Focused on becoming the leader that her father tells her that she can be. And she's really trying to find the courage to stand up to the evil queen and how to find her own agency and rule a kingdom. And she meets so many incredible people along the way. And maybe she finds love, maybe she finds friendship, but really what's important is that she finds her own voice.
Let's go back to where things started falling apart. Her debut in West Side Story was critically praised, but it wasn't the box office success everyone hoped it would be. Despite the hype and Spielberg's involvement, the movie flopped financially. Instead of humbling herself and learning from the industry's reactions, Rachel began turning on the very audiences she needed. She began lecturing during press tours, framing the musical as a deep political thesis rather than a beloved story about love and rivalry. What should have been a celebration of her breakthrough became a platform for self-important commentary that alienated audiences. Her speeches weren't inspiring, they were exhausting. Viewers didn't sign up for a history lesson, they wanted a performance. But Rachel wasn't interested in simply being an actress. She wanted to be a crusader, even if it meant turning her own success into a lecture. But A West Side Story was just the beginning. Then came the Snow White controversy, the point where Rachel truly seemed to lose the public. Disney handed her the role of one of the most iconic characters in animation history. Snow White is more than a movie, it's part of cultural heritage. It represents innocence, kindness, and classic storytelling. Yet, instead of honoring the character, Rachel began trashing the original film. She openly mocked it in interviews, calling the prince a stalker, and claiming the story was outdated. She stated proudly that her version of Snow White wouldn't be about love or dreams, but about leadership and power. It was a complete misunderstanding of what the audience wanted. Instead of respect, Rachel offered revisionism. Instead of humility, she brought arrogance. And instead of enchanting viewers, she insulted their nostalgia.
Jeff and Amy were reading lines, and then our director Mark Webb on Zoom was like, you know, and then Dopey's gonna look at you and whistle, and I took a pause and realized what I was auditioning for, and then it became like I will elbow everyone out of the way to play the part. But it was very sweet, and it was a very short audition process for me.
Everyone on West Side Story has so much stuff. Ariana DeBose has like a poster from the set. I have nothing.
That's amazing.
I have nothing.
You have
from my
memories.
first movie.
Yeah,
I do.
And
I have memories. I got a boyfriend out of it. Like,
That's a lot.
You got the boyfriend.
You took something from the set.
I got a boyfriend, I got a best friend.
Yeah.
The backlash was immediate. Disney fans didn't just disagree, they were furious. They weren't upset because of a modern take. They were upset because of the dismissive tone, the smug delivery, and the lack of gratitude. Rachel seemed to believe she was doing everyone a favor by fixing something that wasn't broken. And Disney noticed. The company began pulling her from promotional materials, delaying the film's release, and editing her image out of merchandise. It was a quiet distancing, but a clear one. When the studio that cast you as a literal princess starts removing your face from posters, it's not a good sign. Then there was the political firestorm. Rachel took to social media with bold, aggressive statements, telling entire groups of people that she didn't need their business if they didn't align with her views. She attacked political figures and their supporters, making sweeping statements that were bound to alienate massive segments of the public, and alienate she did. It wasn't about standing for something, it was about turning every platform into a battleground. Instead of inviting discussion, she shut it down. Instead of building unity, she built walls. She didn't just speak her mind. She used her fame as a megaphone to drown out anyone who disagreed.
I have to pretend like, oh God, well, crazy that we're in front of this.
Wait, how often are you in line for the Snow White ride?
I'm a narcissist. I don't know. It's always like my publicist Ashton was with me the last time it happened, and I was like, God, I hope no one, because every time they come up to me, I'm always online for this freaking ride. Difficult question. Scar, love Scar, because that's like some pure evil. Like he really, really kills that guy. He kills Mufasa. That's crazy. Claude Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, because it's really nasty, because it's about like very real things. And then Hades from Hercules.
Even those who might have supported her began backing away. There's a difference between having strong beliefs and going on the attack. Rachel crossed that line repeatedly. Her online comments went viral for all the wrong reasons. People weren't inspired, they were appalled. Even her supporters couldn't defend the tone or the timing of her remarks. And what made it worse? She doubled down. Instead of clarifying or apologizing, she leaned into the chaos. It wasn't courage, it was poor judgment disguised as conviction. By the time Rachel tried to rebound with a Broadway role in Evita, the damage was done. What should have been a triumphant return to the stage turned into another disaster. Tickets for the show plummeted from $500 to $0. That's not a typo. Tickets literally dropped to free. People weren't willing to pay a dime to see her perform, no matter how talented she may be. And that's the tragedy here. Rachel Zegler is talented. She can sing, she can act. But none of that matters when audiences are exhausted by the person behind the performance. To make things worse, Rachel pulled a stunt where she sang to fans from a balcony outside the theater, while paying guests sat inside watching on a screen. It was supposed to be a moment of connection. Instead, it came off as tone deaf. People paid to see her on stage, not through a monitor. It felt like another attempt to prove something rather than simply perform. Even when she had a stage, she used it to craft headlines rather than entertain. Critics noticed, audiences noticed, social media noticed, but perhaps the most damaging reaction was silence. When studios stop calling, when casting directors quietly move on, when marketing departments A/B test trailers without your name, that's when the career warning signs are impossible to ignore. Rachel Zegler wasn't blacklisted, she wasn't canceled in some loud, dramatic way. She was simply forgotten, phased out, skipped over, the kind of fall that doesn't make headlines but leaves a lasting impression.
And singing all week, how is Snow White going? You're starring in Snow White, the new version. How's it going?
It's going really, really well. We're having so much fun on set. It's so magical. And every day I'm just pinching myself that I'm a freaking Disney princess. It's so stupid. Fun fact, I didn't get to watch it. I didn't see it. I have no idea what everybody was reacting to, but I saw the logo and I got really emotional. I also heard everybody like screaming and I got really excited, which means they must have liked it. But I know how I felt making it, and so hearing everybody's reception of it being so excited and screaming and cheering is so, it just fills your heart with such gratitude. Really, it does.
And even then, Rachel couldn't read the room. She continued making comments that came off as dismissive or self-congratulatory. Her interviews were filled with tone-deaf statements, jokes that fell flat, and an air of entitlement that turned even neutral observers away. She mocked fans, rolled her eyes at critics, and acted as though her failures were somehow the fault of the audience, the studios, or society itself. Never once did she take real responsibility. It's one thing to be a strong personality. Hollywood has plenty of them, but there's a difference between being bold and being brash, between speaking your truth and shutting everyone else down. Rachel seemed to confuse confidence with condescension, and it cost her dearly. Her name, once associated with promise and potential, is now seen as a risk, a gamble studios aren't willing to take. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about rooting for someone to fail. It's about observing what happens when someone refuses to learn, refuses to listen, and refuses to show humility. Rachel Zegler's story is a modern Hollywood fable, a tale of talent wasted by ego, opportunity squandered by arrogance, and success derailed by the inability to connect with the people who matter most, the audience. What's shocking is how preventable it all was. If Rachel had approached her roles with more respect, her interviews with more grace, and her social media with more maturity, she could have had it all. She had the talent, she had the platform, but she lacked the one thing that truly matters in a public career: awareness. Awareness of tone, awareness of perception, awareness of impact.
I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it. Never revisited Snow White again. So I watched it for the first time in probably 17 years.
Instead, she built a wall between herself and her fans. And when the criticism started pouring in, she didn't bridge the gap. She dug in deeper. She made her audience feel like the problem. And when that happens, people walk away, not out of spite, but out of fatigue. Nobody wants to feel insulted by the person they're supposed to cheer for. Nobody wants to support someone who acts like she's doing them a favor just by showing up. As the industry moves forward, new stars rise. Names emerge with charm, gratitude, and an understanding of what it means to be a public figure. Rachel's name, once on every shortlist, is now on the sidelines. It's not a scandal, it's a quiet exit. The kind where people don't talk about you in rooms anymore, not because they're mad, but because they've moved on. And maybe that's the real cautionary tale here. In a world where fame is fast and opportunities are fleeting, how you treat your moment matters. Rachel Zegler had her moment and she talked her way out of it, not with one mistake, but with a pattern of arrogance, a pattern of finger pointing, a pattern of making every spotlight a platform for personal opinions rather than performance. She wasn't taken down by tabloids or rivals. She wasn't caught in a scandal. She simply wore people out. And when the curtain fell, there was no applause, just silence. Let this be a lesson, not just for celebrities, but for anyone in the public eye. Talent is important, but humility, self-awareness, and respect for your audience, that's what makes a career last. Rachel Zegler had every gift, but the wisdom to use them wisely. And that's why her name, once celebrated, is now a reminder of what not to do. Hollywood didn't destroy Rachel Zegler's career. She did it herself. And now, the industry that once embraced her has simply moved on, quietly, permanently, and without looking back. The most telling part of Rachel Zegler's decline isn't just that audiences turned away, it's how completely and consistently the industry distanced itself from her without ever saying a word. There was no grand press release, no viral expose, just silence. Her roles began drying up. Her name began vanishing from headlines. She stopped being the future of Hollywood and quietly faded into its background. What began as a series of controversial interviews eventually morphed into something far more permanent: total irrelevance. One of the clearest indicators of this shift was how Rachel's roles started shrinking. After being handpicked to headline Snow White, a role meant to relaunch Disney's live-action fairy tale universe, she found herself being edited out of trailers, removed from merchandise, and quietly pushed out of promotional cycles. It wasn't just a PR decision, it was a warning sign. Studios didn't want her image associated with their products. Why? Because they feared backlash. Not because of her talent, but because of her tone, because of her attitude, and perhaps most dangerously in Hollywood, because of her unpredictability. No studio wants to invest tens or hundreds of millions into a project only to have the star go viral for all the wrong reasons. With Rachel, that risk became a pattern. One interview, one social media post, one red carpet comment, and the headlines would explode. Not in celebration, but in controversy. Every time she spoke, instead of boosting the brand, she dragged it into damage control. She didn't add value to projects, she added volatility. And in an industry that values stability and marketability, that made her a liability. Even among other actors and industry insiders, Rachel began earning a reputation that no one wants, difficult. Not in the demanding artist sense, but in the unpredictable spokesperson sense. People who once stood by her started keeping their distance, some quietly unfollowed. Others stopped including her in group events. The community that once welcomed her with open arms now regarded her with caution. Not because they hated her, but because they couldn't afford the chaos that followed her everywhere she went. Another missed opportunity came when Rachel was cast in DC's Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This was a second chance, a way to re-enter Hollywood through a lighthearted superhero film, part of a genre that typically connects with large audiences. But instead of treating it like a redemption arc, Rachel turned press interviews into sarcastic spectacles. When asked why she took the role, she responded flatly, "I needed a job." That quote made headlines, not because it was charming, but because it came off as ungrateful and dismissive of the very film meant to revive her image. Once again, a door opened, and she slammed it shut with her own words. Rachel's entire brand became synonymous with resistance, not resistance in the inspirational sense, but resistance to feedback, to guidance, and to basic PR strategy. Every time she was advised to soften her tone, she doubled down. Every time the public gave her a second chance, she seemed to fumble it by reminding everyone why they turned away in the first place. She wasn't just outspoken, she was stubborn. And while confidence is admirable, ignoring every piece of professional advice is not, especially in an industry built on collaboration. Behind the scenes, many directors began expressing concern. Some said she brought too much baggage to a role. Others feared casting her would bring political distraction instead of creative focus. One industry insider was even quoted anonymously as saying, "Rachel doesn't spark excitement, she sparks debates." That's not what producers want to hear when they're greenlighting a project. When you become a constant point of controversy, your artistic ability gets overshadowed by the noise surrounding you. And it wasn't just film. Her Broadway run, once full of promise, collapsed into chaos for the same reasons. She had talent, no doubt, but her behavior off stage often undermined her work on it. Audiences weren't angry at her performance, they were confused by her decisions. Singing from a balcony instead of performing on stage, that wasn't an artistic flourish. It was a public relations mistake. It told audiences that even when they paid top dollar, they weren't the priority. That kind of message lingers long after the curtain falls. What made this all the more tragic is that Rachel never seemed to fully understand what was happening. In her mind, she was misunderstood, punished for being bold, outspoken, or different. But in reality, she was being held accountable for how she treated the people watching, the people paying, the people supporting. There's a huge difference between being a trailblazer and burning bridges. And Rachel, intentionally or not, managed to burn almost everyone. Her online presence also became more erratic. While most rising stars focus on positivity, gratitude, or at least professionalism, Rachel's feed remained defiant. Political posts, aggressive responses, and tone-deaf humor flooded her profiles. Instead of building a community, she built an echo chamber, one where criticism wasn't met with reflection, but retaliation. And that kind of behavior doesn't endear you to fans, it alienates them. Even Rachel's most devoted supporters began to grow quiet. At first, they defended her missteps, then they made excuses, but eventually, even they stopped talking. The silence was deafening. No trending hashtags, no petition comebacks, just a slow realization that the person they once admired wasn't interested in earning back trust. She was too busy proving a point that no one was asking her to make. As time passed, other young actresses began rising. New faces with charm, humility, and a sense of gratitude stepped into the spotlight. They didn't need to dominate headlines to earn praise. They simply did their jobs with grace. And in that contrast, Rachel's absence became more noticeable. Not because people missed her, but because her downfall stood as a reminder of what not to do. There's an unspoken rule in show business: audiences will forgive almost anything except contempt. And Rachel Zegler, time and time again, gave the impression that she didn't like her fans, didn't respect the legacy of her roles, and didn't appreciate the career she was given. Whether it was walking out of a restaurant because someone sang a line from her own movie or mocking people who supported her early success, Rachel consistently sent one message: I'm not like you, and I don't have to be. That attitude might work for a pop star or a social media influencer, but not for someone playing Snow White, not for someone stepping into roles that millions of families hold dear. These characters don't just require talent, they require trust. And once that trust is broken, it's incredibly difficult to repair. Eventually, even the mainstream press stopped defending her. Articles went from celebratory to cautiously critical to downright dismissive. She was no longer the next big thing. She was the one who squandered it. Headlines became harsher, reviews less forgiving. Even when she delivered strong performances, the commentary often focused more on her attitude than her acting. She wasn't judged by her ability anymore, but by her behavior. Now, when her name trends, it's rarely for anything positive. It's often because of another awkward interview, another divisive comment, or another misstep on stage or online. And while some might argue that any publicity is good publicity, that's simply not true in a career built on fan loyalty and brand trust. Rachel Zegler didn't just fall from grace, she pushed herself off the pedestal. And in doing so, she created a blueprint for how to lose Hollywood without a single scandal. No arrests, no lawsuits, just a pattern of arrogance, detachment, and poor judgment. The real tragedy is that it didn't have to be this way. If Rachel had shown even a sliver of humility, even a hint of gratitude, her path could have been entirely different. Audiences are forgiving. Fans love a comeback. But for that to happen, the person at the center of the storm has to want it. They have to change. They have to grow. And so far, Rachel Zegler has shown no sign of doing any of that. Instead, she continues to present herself as the misunderstood hero in her own story, the victim of unfair backlash, the target of mean-spirited media. But that's not the reality. The truth is far simpler and far sadder. Rachel Zegler had every door opened for her. And instead of walking through them with grace, she slammed them shut with ego. And now the lights are dim, the roles are fewer, the fan base is gone. The media is done chasing her. She's not being attacked. She's not being canceled. She's just being ignored. Hollywood has moved on. The industry has moved on. And perhaps, worst of all, so has the audience. In the end, Rachel's story isn't just a fall from stardom. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when talent isn't matched by character, when opportunity meets arrogance, when the spotlight shines on someone who can't stop pushing everyone away. The fairy tale's over, and this time there's no magic mirror to bring her back.